are some of the most infamous leaders to ever have existed in history? While the list is very large and we can be at it all day, we're only going to hone in on 3 main figures throughout different points in history. The leaders that we're about to cover had their own malevolent intentions unique to their particular situations in history. First, we're going to discuss the infamous Mongol Empire. More particularly, we're going to focus on the Khans, and within that, Genghis Khan himself.
The year is 1206. A portion of the Asian continent was made up of nomadic tribes and other dynasties such as China and India. However, in the northern part of the steppes lied the foundation of what would become the infamous Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan's leadership played a crucial role in the success of the empire. He was able to unite various tribes under his rule. This would originally be the Temujin coalition, which included a variety of tribes and nomads, until they would form a single Mongol state under the rule of Genghis Khan. The Mongols would expand further into portions of Siberia and China. The foundations of the empire were set. Genghis began to look beyond Mongolia and put his gaze towards the Middle East, most notably on his rival, the Khwarezmian Empire. Genghis had a bitter disdain for the Khwarezmians. This was due to the governor of Otrar, Inalchuk, who accused the members of a Mongol caravan of being spies and had the entire caravan executed, with the exception of one survivor who managed to escape and bring news of the massacre back to Genghis Khan. Genghis tried diplomatic efforts to ease the tensions but were of no avail. War was coming. However, nobody would be prepared for the horrors that were about to unfold. Some of the most brutal chapters in history were about to commence. In 1219, governor of Otrar, Inalchuk, had severely provoked Genghis Khan, who as a result led a vast army to invade the Khwarezmian Empire and lay siege to Otrar. After 5 months, the oasis town was captured. The Mongols executed Inalchuk by having molten silver poured down his neck. Some accounts say it was poured into his ears and eyes. The fighters defending Otrar were all killed, and the entire population of the city was brought out onto the plain by the Mongols. Every one of them, numbering about 100,000, was put to the sword. The invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire was now underway. This would mark the end of the Muslim Golden Age for many of the emirates and sultanates. Genghis Khan was not done there. In February 1221, Genghis Khan's forces laid siege to the city of Merv. When the people of Merv surrendered to the Mongols, the conquerors responded by virtually wiping the city off the map, murdering, pillaging, and wrecking the ancient metropolis. Genghis was reported to have given himself a front-row seat for the mayhem at Merv, sitting on a golden throne, watching as men were dragged before him and executed. The invaders tortured the wealthy citizens of Merv, so they'd give up their money and jewels. Khan apparently ordered each of his soldiers to kill at least 300 people. One source puts the number of dead in the Merv massacre at 700,000, while a contemporary Persian chronicler estimated the number of corpses at a staggering 1.3 million. This would be only the beginning of the nightmares that would unfold. The next target of the Mongols was the city of Nishapur. Mongol commander Tukachar, who was also the husband of Genghis Khan's daughter, died in the siege, being killed by an arrow. The Mongols prevailed in the end, but after being hit with grief, Genghis Khan's daughter requested the death of every resident of the city as vengeance for her husband's death. In order to become sure that no wounded would survive the massacre, Khan's troops killed and beheaded most of the population of the city, and their skulls were reputedly piled in pyramids by the Mongols. Women, infants, children, and even cats and dogs were among the beheaded. Nobody and nothing was out of question to being the target of the Mongols' barbaric methods of bringing death and destruction and leaving very little behind. It was almost like a sport to the soldiers to figure out creative methods on how to use their wrath on others. The Khwarezmian Empire could not recover from these horrors and setbacks. A short time later, the empire would eventually collapse, opening the gates of the Middle East and Europe for the Mongols. The Mongolian territory now spanned almost entirely across the Asian continent, ushering in a new chapter in the Mongol Empire's history. After his conquests in the Middle East, Genghis Khan would die not too long after, which would see his third son, Ogedei Khan, in charge of his father's legacy. Genghis Khan chose Ogedei as his successor, most likely because he had an even temperament, and had often made peace when his 2 older brothers fought. But much like his father, Ogedei loved war, sending the vast Mongol hordes thousands of miles in nearly every direction to fight and expand the empire. However, he would be most infamous for one of the most heinous crimes known to man: In 1237, the Oirat people failed to contribute the expected cohort of young women to the Mongol emperor's harem. A furious Ogadei decided to punish the Oirat. He ordered 4,000 Oirat girls to be repeatedly raped by his soldiers, and that the girls' families were to be forced to watch. 2 of these girls died in the crime, and the rest were distributed as sex slaves among the harem, merchant caravans, and the Mongol army. It is crimes like these that are lost to history, and we can only imagine what it might have been like to bear witness to the atrocities. The Mongols proceeded to expand in all directions in the years to come. By the year 1258, the empire encompassed all of modern-day Iran, the Caucasus, eastern Ukraine, and more than half of China. However, they would face another great empire in the west, the Abbasid Empire. The Abbasid Empire was at the heart of the great Muslim powers at the time. The Abbasids held one of the most resplendent cities with grand libraries, palaces, mosques, and a center of learning for centuries. This was the city of Baghdad. The Mongols had their next target in their sights. Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, led an army of 150,000 men to the capital. The Mongol forces, which included Chinese siege engineers, captured the city on February 10, 1258. The victors poured into the city and began a week of carnage, inflicting on the residents a campaign of pillaging, rape, torture, and murder. One account reports that 800,000 were killed during the siege of Baghdad. However, this does not include those who drowned, as there were children who were thrown into pools of mud, and those who died from disease, hunger, and even fear itself. Some sources even go as high as 2 million for the total number of fatalities. With the Abbasid Empire obliterated, the Mongols pushed further into Eastern Europe. By 1279, the empire had reached its peak in territorial expansion under the rule of Kublai Khan. The empire would see its last days in the year 1368 due to a multitude of factors with loss of territory, reconquests from China, and internal conflicts within the ruling Khans. But there is no denying that the Mongol Empire is a true testament in showing one of the most darkest times in human history, a period in history that we never want to return to.
Next up on our list, we're going to be fast-forwarding a few centuries ahead in time to another enigmatic figure known to many by popular media, movies, and books. This is none other than Vlad the Impaler, aka Dracula.
Our tale starts in 1448, when Vlad III begins his reign over the Principality of Wallachia. But who was Vlad the Impaler, really? Beneath the blood-stained reputation, Vlad was a cunning and strategic leader. He united Wallachia against its enemies. His iron-fisted rule preserved the independence of Wallachia, while instilling fear in the hearts of those who dared challenge him. Wallachia gained independence from Hungary in 1330. Ever since, the two nations have had a shaky alliance not solid in foundation. Hungary's rulers saw Vlad as a populist leader and had no interest in aiding the country against foreign invaders, along with wanting to distance themselves from Vlad's notorious reputation of being cruel. But why did Vlad resort to such extreme measures? Many historians believe it was his traumatic childhood experiences that shaped his path. As a young boy, he was taken hostage by the Ottomans, witnessing their cruelty firsthand. This fueled his desire for vengeance and instilled in him a deep hatred for his enemies. In 1459, Mehmed II sent an embassy to Vlad III, claiming a tribute of 10,000 ducats and 300 young boys, to which Vlad denied. In the spring of 1462, Mehmed II assembled an army of 90,000 men and advanced on Wallachia. The Ottoman forces severely outnumbered the Wallachian forces and were well equipped with elite military troops known as janissaries. The Sultan saw this as an easy victory. For Vlad's forces, the majority of the army consisted of peasants and shepherds, while the boyars on horseback, who were few in numbers, were armed with lances, swords, and daggers, and wore chainmail as armor. Vlad's personal guard consisted of mercenaries from many countries, and some gypsies. Before battle, it is believed that Vlad told his men that it would be better that those who think of death should not follow me. The two leaders fought a series of skirmishes, the most notable one being the night attack, where Vlad attacked the Turkish camp in the night in an attempt to kill Mehmed. The assassination attempt failed, and Mehmed marched to the Wallachian capital of Targoviste, where he found a few men with cannons. After conducting a series of night raids and guerrilla warfare, Vlad employed his trademark tactic, impaling more than 23,000 prisoners with their families and putting them on display along the enemy's route, outside the city of Targovista. Infants affixed to their mothers on the stakes, and birds had made their nests in their entrails. The sight was so horrifying that Mehmed, after seeing the forest of the dead, turned around and marched back to Constantinople. Both sides claimed victory in the campaign, and Mehmed's forces returned home with many captured slaves, horses, and cattle, despite Vlad gaining an edge over Mehmed. This would mark the beginning of the end for the prince. The battle came at a high cost for the Wallachians, and Vlad felt the effects in more ways than one. Vlad's power, money, and troops had faded away so much that Hungary was able to take him prisoner in 1462. Vlad was imprisoned for 12 years, while power changed hands several times in Wallachia. Around 1475, Hungary sent Vlad to recover Wallachia for Hungary. In November 1476, Vlad scored an initial victory, but 1 month later suffered a brutal defeat. His rival, backed by Ottoman troops, ambushed, killed, and beheaded him. By most accounts, his severed head was sent to Mehmed in Constantinople to be put on display above the city's gates. Wallachia would not be able to fully recover from Vlad's passing, and would eventually be annexed by the Ottoman Empire. Even though Vlad was killed, his notorious legacy has continued to live on to this day, known to many as Dracula. Vlad's rule may have been shrouded in darkness, but it left a lasting impact on Wallachia. His ruthless methods achieved his ultimate goal of defending his people and preserving the region's independence for as long as he could. Today, Vlad the Impaler is remembered as both a hero and a villain, leaving behind a complex and controversial legacy.
Last up on our list, we're going to fast forward again several centuries into the future during the renowned Napoleonic Wars period. And you could have guessed it, we're going to be discussing the fall of the infamous French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. Particularly, we're going to be focusing in on what led up to his demise and look at how far his power stretched across the continental part of Europe.
After securing the European mainland, Napoleon put his gaze on Great Britain. Knowing he could not invade Britain by land, he looked to bleed London dry of its wealth by instituting the continental system, which would block Britain from trading with any countries on the mainland. This had little effect on Britain. Instead, Napoleon developed a new fascination in the Iberian Peninsula. Napoleon would be authoritarian in Spain and conquer Portugal, which forces the royal family to flee to Brazil. Spanish citizens began to not like the French ruling their country as dissent grew. Napoleon's troops would be defeated at the Battle of Balen. The British would land in Portugal and push out the rest of the French troops from Iberia. News of this spread through Europe as the Fifth Coalition is formed against France. Napoleon would eventually bring Iberia back to a place of stability. Austria joins through the aid of Britain. But is ultimately unsuccessful after the crushing defeat in the Battle of Wagram. Austria is forced into a peace deal, which includes the alliance through marriage where Napoleon divorces Josephine and marries Marie-Louise. After attempts to sway Tsar Nicholas to go to war against Britain, Napoleon invades Russia. Napoleon's troops begin to march deep into Russian territory towards Moscow. However, the Russians resort to scorched earth tactics as they retreat to Moscow and lure Napoleon in. Moscow is abandoned and winter approaches. Napoleon is forced to retreat, but the Russians are one step ahead and corner Napoleon at the Battle of Borodino. It is a devastating defeat for Napoleon as he abandons what's left of his army. More than 400,000 French soldiers die. The Sixth Coalition is formed. Napoleon's troops are forced out of Iberia by British troops that landed in Portugal. Back in the east, Napoleon faces off with the Russian and Prussian armies. Napoleon beats the odds and wins 3 battles over the combined forces. until Austria joins the coalition and defeats Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig. Swedish, Russian, Prussian, and Austrian forces encroach on the French border, which forces the government to sign an armistice. Napoleon is exiled to the island of Corsica, where he remains until he returns to France and makes his way back to Paris, where he is greeted as a hero. News of this travels to other countries as they form the Seventh Coalition. Napoleon leads his troops to the Belgian region of Flanders, where he splits his army to deal with the Prussians at the Battle of Wavre, and the British forces led by the Duke of Wellington at the well-known Battle of Waterloo. Unfortunately for Napoleon, he is unsuccessful at the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon is now seen as a fugitive as he makes an attempt to escape France to go to America. He is caught and sent to the remote island of St. Helena off the coast of Africa. Napoleon would end up living out the rest of his days there, dying in 1821. Despite what many may think of Napoleon, he ultimately was responsible for bringing the idea of revolution to other European countries, where the rights of man and enlightenment were eventually adopted. Napoleon was a tyrant to many, a philosopher to others, and a legend to history, bringing monarchies to their knees time and time again.
Thank you so much for watching. What are your thoughts on our list? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more historical content. We'll see you in the next one.